In a world where Twitter leads the headlines and the 24-hour news cycle forces people to choose sides, we're here to help you cut through the noise and discover that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Hosted by entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and regular media contributor Seth Denson. Subscribe, share, rank, and review. Welcome to Somewhere in the Middle on the Real News Communication Network.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday. And if you're battling a case of the Mondays today, I got to tell you, we got the antidote here. You're somewhere in the middle. We're glad to have you back. Episode 6. Thanks for the reminder on that, Zach.
Yeah, no problem. Well, tand you. I was typing up the Facebook title, and I was like, what is this, episode 6 already? Six of these things we've done?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Indeed.
Not canceled yet. That's always good.
Your money's still good here.
Although today, I'm telling you, today could be interesting. I was prepping for this week and getting ready for the show, and some of the listener feedback that we've been getting has been that we've skirted topics that are too controversial.
Which is wild to me, because we do a fair number of shows here. Yours is the most controversial so far. Like, from episode 1, you wanted to do controversial stuff. Yeah, so I'm surprised that people think, you're skirting issues here, Seth. You're not going deep enough.
I did notice that, so you get, Real News, the great folks here at Real News Communications Network have this tagline, I think, that you guys do on the front and the back end of the shows here, that hey, the things discussed don't necessarily reflect the opinions of Jeff Crilly and the good folks here at Real News Communications Network. I think you guys have boldened that one for mine, haven't you?
Yeah, I want you to know, we didn't used to do that, and when we started doing it, and I didn't want to, because I didn't feel like we didn't need to, but I did it all lowercase. I thought it was classy and like it was kind of neat and clean. And then somewhere along the way, just a few weeks ago, they said, you know what? Got to be all caps. We want people to know that whatever is said, we're not. I'm like, all right, well, that's fair, I guess. So it is what it is. But I stand behind it.
Be honest.
Yeah.
Seth's show was brought up as part of that overall underlying conversation, was it not?
I can't confirm or deny anything, Seth, here on this podcast. We'll talk after the show. How about that?
So for those of you listening that wanted more controversy or controversy or however the word is said today, however the kids are saying it, today might be your episode. And we had a little bit of a curveball today, but we're going to sit back on it and swing for the fences. So today we're going to be talking a little gun control, which if you were listening to the news this week, you might have heard that you can actually just go down to Best Buy, possibly, buy a pretty little 3D printer and make yourself a gun at home.
That's right.
And so for those fun, law-abiding folks here in Texas, well, you might think to yourself, hey, you know what? I don't have to go to gun shows anymore. I can just go to Best Buy.
Hoorah.
But, it is one of those things, though, that got me to thinking about where we are and what's going on. And so, gun control is one of those topics that you have people on the extreme right and you have folks on the extreme left. But then you got some folks in the middle, and I think that's where I am. So what I wanted to do today was originally bring back TJ Morris. So for those of you that were around a couple of weeks ago, TJ was on the show with us when we took on kind of our America's position in the world, right? It was on the heels of the NATO summit. And for those of you who remember TJ, he has a YouTube channel called Squid and Bear. Matter of fact, I'm going to be a guest on that show tonight.
Really?
At 7 p.m. So if you're on YouTube, if you're a YouTuber, then go to search Squid and Bear tonight.
Squid and Bear.
Now, I did learn a little bit that on their show, they pass out cigars and beer as they start the show.
Whoa.
So maybe we could just take the whole group here along.
Yeah, what are we doing? Yeah, that's an idea. Right? That's not so bad.
So I'm going to be on that show tonight. TJ, in turn, was going to come on this show because TJ has some hot sports opinions on gun control and some opinions on where we are as a society and what rights we should have and all of that. So I was excited to have him on the show because I thought, well, he's going to have done his homework and he is going to have some undeniable opinions on this that actually might conflict with some of my opinions on this. I'm not sure. We didn't debate this idea of gun control and what that means, but I'm just reading between the lines in conversations that he and I had. So TJ was coming on the show. Unfortunately, if you're listening in the DFW area, we've had a little bit of wet weather today. And the wet weather on TJ's approach to down here to Real News Communication Studios got the best of his vehicle, and unfortunately he is going to be unable to join us. But have no fear, because we are going to power through. And we're going to have a real conversation, even though there may not be TJ in the room. We have, obviously, Zach with us, who always offers some great thoughts and insights that most of the time make sense.
Well, thanks.
But also Andrew Clark, who many of you know. Many of you have heard some thoughts from Andrew. Matter of fact, I got some great feedback on you, Andrew, this week.
Ooh.
That who was the good yin to Seth's yang in the studio? That was the comment. I went, well, wait a minute. I don't know how to take that.
Wow. Whoa.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go positive.
But was that, hey, he doesn't say much, but man, when he does, it's good stuff. He's got good data points, and he speaks into the mic well. So those of you that don't know Andrew, we're going to dive into Andrew a little bit more.
Well, thanks, Mom, for sneaking on Facebook and putting it up there. I really appreciate it.
All right. Because Andrew is what I would like to call, he calls himself a California conservative, which usually means you're a Texas liberal.
Yep, that's pretty accurate.
Yeah. So you were kicked out of California because you were just a little too right-wing for them.
I did. They found out I had a gun, and they chased me.
Yeah. And
at a distance. The Priuses don't go that fast.
But the Prius. That tells you enough right there,
Yeah, it
right?
really does, doesn't
I don't
it?
think they even sell those in Texas. I think you have to bring those into the state, don't you? No comment?
Import only.
Yeah. Funny. So, but anyway, so Andrew and I have had some conversations on gun control. And so what I thought we would do is talk about this a little bit. And so with TJ not here today, we're missing the bear in the room, but I still think that between the three of us, we might move the needle on this a little bit.
Yeah, why not, right? Who's to say we can't?
I know, right?
Yeah.
So going back to my original point or original statement, so this week in the news, it came out that, and Andrew, you may have some more details on this story. So a young man came up with a design to create a 3D gun that you could literally print at home, right?
Yes, called the Liberator.
The Liberator. Well, I mean, come on.
It's no judge, but...
I mean, a Liberator? I mean, if you are a Second Amendment guy, that's the right name.
That's a pretty catchy name for it.
It is. So the whole Twitter sphere went haywire over this thing.
As they do.
And you got both extremes on both sides of this saying, wait a minute, the obviously the far left and the people that are not so much in favor of the Second Amendment said, hey, wait a minute, we can't have this where people are able to just literally build a gun at home, and started talking about, all of the violence out there in school shootings, and I mean, literally, you could take that down any rabbit hole you wanted to. And then, of course, the far right people said, well, wait a minute. It's our right under the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, and that, who says that I have to just go to a gun shop and a manufacturer to get it if I can build it at home? It's always been legal to build your own gun here in the United States, right?
Yes. Can't sell it without getting into some laws, but you can always make your own.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious as to your guys' opinions on this. So you have this ability, because I've got my own, and I'm going to share them here in a minute, but to print your own gun at home? Where's our head around this?
Andrew, you want to jump on this first, or should I?
You absolutely should be allowed to make one.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, and that's a lot of the protectionism on this is more, I think it's more about sales, that it's a product theft. We've got, Uber took away jobs from taxi drivers. Now you've got the ability with these 3D printers to make whatever you want to make within reason, and you can now make a gun. Some assembly is required. It's not like a one-button production.
Okay.
But I think you should be allowed to do this.
Really?
Yeah.
I would not have thought that was
I
going to be
know.
your response.
I know.
Yeah. I'll tell you. So there's a okay. Here I'm going to be the California
All right.
conservative.
We'll trade spots on
Texas
this one
liberal
point,
here
I
a little
promise.
bit. I think that again, this is when we get into freedom and people's rights, and I am all about the fact that people should have a right to keep and bear arms. And by the way, bear arms is something we should have a deeper conversation about too. And maybe we won't get into that on today's show. But listen, I got to think gun control is one of those we could have multiple shows, and still not, touch on all the topics. It does make me nervous though, and we're going to talk about this here in a minute. When you got people that potentially have the desire to do harm. People who potentially have maybe some behavioral or mental illness issues that they're fighting, now have the ability to just go push a button. And to your point, there's some assembly required, but I got to think in the YouTube world, assembly isn't as hard as it used to be.
Correct. There are walkthroughs, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Someone's built one somewhere.
I'm not saying that it's right or that it's wrong. I'm saying that I'm concerned.
Right. I think that's where I come in. I think people should be allowed to do it. I worry it might be too easy. It's too simple. Like, it feels like, and I know I'm reading too far into it, but I mean, to buy spray paint, you got to be 18 or older, right? How old you got to be to buy plastic for a 3D printer?
Right.
Maybe it's just too easy. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that's a very good point. I don't think there's definitely not any restrictions on purchasing the plastic spools.
Right.
Because they sell kid versions of 3D printers, for example.
Yeah.
Which are small, not actually.
I can't
a
imagine you're
terrifying
liberating
thought.
anything with one of those, but I don't know. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know either.
That's where I was kind of starting to kind of think through this and
Yeah.
lean down it a little bit, is because I can't, you can't be a 15-year-old kid who just got bullied at school and walk into Academy Sports
Right.
and buy a gun. But I can be a 15-year-old kid who just got bullied at school and go home and push print and go on YouTube and figure out how to put this thing together.
That is a good point. I actually hadn't considered that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew 15-year-olds with 3D printers back in the day. Like, that was a thing, and that wasn't even that long ago.
It tells you your age. I knew 15-year-olds with dot matrix printers. I was one of those 15-year-olds.
8 tracks.
You didn't want to get that paper offline.
Oh,
and it
yeah.
skewed the whole
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
anyway.
Totally.
But that's the concern, right? So at what point do we not infringe upon people's rights, but make sure we have this structure in place that maybe those that aren't mature enough to handle rights as they are offered
Sure.
have access to do that.
Or understand the implications of the responsibilities of those rights.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, then that might come back down to a parental oversight. Well, we'll swing there, Shrum.
Yeah, there's a whole nother topic for a show.
I'll hold it. Yeah. But
It's tough, isn't it?
yeah, I was going to say, well, surely a parent knows what's going on in their kid's bedroom. And I'm like, well, wait, hold on.
Yeah.
They don't. As a matter of fact, let's take that one on a little bit, right?
Sure.
So I was having we were talking the other day. Some friends of mine were, and the commentary came up of, hey man, and I'm not going to call this person out by name, but they said, we've gone a whole month and a half or 2 months without hearing about a school shooting.
Why'd you say it? Don't say it.
It's summertime. Kids aren't in school.
Yeah.
So you're right. To your point, if that's the argument you want to make, you're right. I think we have turned a corner in the United States. We have solved the school shooting problem. Yep. Don't have school.
We haven't had a shuttle explosion in months.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, and so, but this is the concern, right? And so we that morphed into a deeper conversation. I kind of do wish TJ was here because I think he would have some sports opinions on this. But do we just babysit with TV screens and video games now, and we don't pay attention? Listen, I had wonderful parents.
Yeah.
I love them to death. I don't remember ever feeling that they were snooping or coming into our room or looking. But Dad had this ability to know everything about everything all the time.
Sure.
And I hear about some of these things like the school shooting we had in Santa Fe towards the end of the school year last year. And you always hear the parents, and I can't even begin to put myself in their shoes, right? But we had no idea. You had no idea. I mean, your kid has a 20-page manifesto on every social media page out there. Their room looked like they were preparing to go into war or the zombie apocalypse, one of the two. How do you not pay attention? Mm-hmm. Check them out. You're not infringing on your kids' rights when they're 15 years old to go in their room and make sure under the bed there's not something going on that allows them to amass warfare against others.
Right. I can get behind the we didn't think, we didn't know, but the idea of no idea. Like you had some idea somewhere in there. There was a something that crossed a ticker tape line. You went, that's a little radar going off, a little bit of parental something. Like that seems odd, but
then that comes down to then you've got to admit yourself, I may have messed up as a parent, and that might be just easier to kind of push under the denial rug than address.
Well, the challenge is, and so let's kind of shift this gear a little bit because again, talking about school shootings and what's going on, we're nearing that time of year again. Kids are prepping to go back to school.
Sure.
I had a real gut check moment with my kid the other day. So Emerson is my 4-year-old, and she'll start school in the fall. And and shame on some of the life and the things that we try to protect our kids from, because sometimes we don't realize some of the things that they are retaining and information that's out there in the world. And my 4-year-old, who we're getting ready to buy the backpack, and we're talking about how exciting school is going to be, and you're going to meet all these new friends and these great things, and she's excited. But she came to me and my wife Jenna the other day and looked up to me and said, "Daddy, I don't think I want to go to school." I said, "Well, why, sweetie? What? I mean, it's going to be fun. You have friends and all." She goes, I don't want to get shot." And you want to talk about this moment in a father's life when you're looking down and trying to share with your kid how much your job is to protect them and that they are going to be put in a safe place. But then I got to thinking to myself, there's going to be a certain subset of hours in the day that I will have no necessary control over her surroundings. And I have always been a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment. I grew up, guns were in my house. We had them growing up, but we grew up understanding and respecting what they were all about. We also didn't have just everyday access to them either. Guns were as real as everything else, but there was a certain respect and rule and law around guns and what they were about. My fondest memories of my childhood were hunting trips that my dad would take with my granddad, my brothers and I, and it was kind of an annual tradition at the end of every summer. We would get to go bird hunting in the plains of West Texas, and it was something that to this day I would still replicate. Those were my fondest memories of my brothers and my father and my grandfather and my uncles and cousins, and it was just this big event, and guns were a central part of that, but it wasn't about the guns. It was about the experience that we were going to have, and guns just happened to be part of it because it's hard to bird hunt without guns, right? And so this idea that now I have to go, and shifting gears there too, I want the ability, if somebody's coming into my house to do harm to me and my family, that I have the ability to protect my family from that. So, but now I have this real conversation that I'm having with my 4-year-old about the fact that school shootings are a reality and they're almost becoming as consistent as Friday night football. And what am I going to say to my 4-year-old? And then secondarily, what am I going to say to myself to make sure that I'm putting my 4-year-old in a position where I know that she is safe, where she is protected? And at what point do we come into conflict with what we believe is right in the Second Amendment and what is right for society? Because there has to be a place where those two intersect. Right? And so as I'm thinking through this, I think somewhere in the middle. And I think about the fact that there has to be a place where we can come to, where we eliminate the extremes and we have real conversations. Because the Second Amendment is there. Matter of fact, it is arguably the shortest amendment to the Constitution. I think it may be the actual shortest. It says, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." That's it. There's no prequel. There's no postquel. That's it. Right? And so I firmly believe that this is great stuff. But just like everything else, there are layers here. And maybe the layer is that we should have the right to keep and bear arms. I believe that we should. But the conversation can't end there. And when we start to use words like gun control, we awaken the senses of the far right that says you're trying to control the conversation. And then we have the far left who would be perfectly fine eliminating guns and us being a European state where they're not allowed. But guess what? Violence happens there too. And I agree with the argument that bad people are going to do bad things and they're going to find a way to do it. But does that necessarily mean that we give them the keys and the easy access to do it? What do you think?
Trying to think what the first step is to find that balance. So
it's got to be a conversation with people that aren't on the extreme, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think the first step in finding that balance is acceptance that there is a balance, right? The most divided the country's ever been is the Civil War, and we got over that. Like, we managed to work that out somewhere along.
But...
Sure, yeah. So for gun control, like you're right. There's a middle, and I think the most important. I like to think that the most important part of figuring that out is, one, acceptance that there is a middle, and that we got to find it, right?
Yeah.
So if I agree not to take them all away, where are you going to come towards me on this this conversation?
Yeah.
But no, I think that's right. Again, I think you just it's like mark this. Okay. I am about to draw a parallel.
Got it.
Between figure skating and gun control.
Go on.
So in figure skating, the way that they do the judging is they throw out the bottom and the top, right? They throw out the top score and they throw out the bottom score, and it's the people in the middle that ultimately get to define the score to remove any bias or favoritism or lack thereof. And I think if you want to get somewhere on understanding a better way to manage the overall process of guns in this country, you must do the same thing. You must eliminate the far right side of this that says, nope, if I want a 50 caliber or a bump stock or a gun that I can push a button and it shoots off 75 rounds in 62 seconds, I should have the right to do that because, doggone it, the forefathers gave me that right in the Second Amendment. Did they? Did they really? And then the far left who says, no, all people are good and that if we eliminated guns, there would be zero violence in the world. Really? Is that really the way it would all work? Because, people were projecting violence and killing people long before guns were invented, right? Mm-hmm. So there is a balance. So again, figure skating, scoring process. We eliminate both people from that conversation.
The representatives of New York and Kentucky are no longer needed. Please leave the floor.
Maybe.
But Seth, if you talk about taking people out of the conversation, you stumble into the First Amendment, right? People's ability to express themselves and have their voices heard.
Oh, right? They can have their voices heard and they can express themselves. Doesn't mean I'm going to listen to them. Right?
Oh, no.
I know, right? I mean, but that's the challenge, right? The people that are stepping up to the mic are people on the extremes.
Right.
And I'm not saying they shouldn't have a voice. I get it. But maybe that there are more layers than a yes or a no here. For example, you want a 50 cal? Great. I'm perfectly for that. I personally would like to shoot a 50 cal someday in my life. I think that would be quite the experience. But maybe there's some specific licensure involved in this, right? Like I can go buy a tractor trailer that can drive down the tollway up here in Dallas, right? But I have to have a special license to do it.
Sure.
They're not just going to let me go buy myself an 18-wheeler and drive it to work every day.
Thank God.
I know, right? There's a special licensure there. But I still have a right to do it. I have a right to go get the license.
Sure.
I have a right to apply, to be approved, to go through the process.
Assuming you don't have too many DUIs or
there
something restrictive.
There you go. So maybe there is some layers here, too. I'm not infringing on your rights. I'm just saying that your rights come with responsibilities. And part of the responsibility is that, A, you're not mentally challenged in some way, shape, form, or capacity. B, you know how to work the thing. And C, there's some subjectivity here to make sure that Part A and Part B are in alignment before we allow you Part C, which is here's your 50 cal, go have some fun.
So a barrier for entry that is deeper than strictly citizenship. That's
right.
Okay.
That's right.
Or just a driver's license. So I've got a fun tidbit on that. We're getting to background checks here. Using fake driver's licenses bearing fictitious names, investigators with the Government Accountability Office had a 100% success rate buying firearms in 5 states that met the minimum requirements of the federal background check system.
Using fake IDs?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Because at gun shows, you just show your driver's license.
And you're on your way.
Because there's no background check there.
It's like using a fake ID to get in a bar.
Exactly. They don't have a system to run it against.
Good point, though.
So if you just have the ID, it's not good enough. So you do have to get more restrictive than just.
But to your point, Zach, I think you bring up a good point. You can use a fake ID to get in the bar.
Yeah.
But if you get hammered at that bar, get in your car, drive home, and kill a family of 4, who's responsible?
Whoever served you.
That's right, the bar owner.
Right.
There's some responsibility there. And I think this is the problem when it comes to guns. Again, disclaimer, Second Amendment guy.
Sure.
Own guns, grew up with guns, have a respect for guns, have an understanding of their value in my protection of my family, my enjoyment through what I do, whether I hunt or whether I shoot skeet on the weekends, which I enjoy doing as well, right? So all of these things play into that, but there comes a responsibility. So if you are this gun show guy and I got an ID, I'm like, hey, listen, I had an ID. It was a valid ID. But don't you have some responsibility there?
So it's not a fake ID, it's a real ID.
It is a real ID.
But how could you know? So if I'm just at the fair, I'm at the gun show, and you walk up, you show me your ID, you give me money, I give you the gun, and then you go shoot somebody with it. You're saying that I could be held responsible.
I'm not saying that you should. I'm saying what if? I'm saying, is this part of the conversation
Would this
here?
work?
Then I, as a seller, would definitely want some sort of system to trust.
Well, you'd have to.
Yeah, you'd have to have something that links to the FBI or...
Wait a minute. So you're saying you should maybe be a little bit more responsible as a seller?
Could be. But I would want to be responsible on somebody else's back. I would want a system that would tell me. Because as a seller, I don't know what you did in New York or what you did in Michigan. I need to know. I need to have a computer access to that.
So maybe, just maybe, if we're doing something like selling a gun to somebody, we should take a little bit more time and do a little bit more background check or do a little bit more of our own homework to make sure that we're not doing that in a place or a person. How do we accomplish this? And this is a question. I'm not making a statement here.
Yeah.
How do we accomplish this without infringing upon rights? So again, I'm going to read the Second Amendment again. A well-regulated militia, timeout.
What?
A well-regulated militia. So let's think about where our forefathers were. Again, I'm going to come across as a guy that's trying to take everybody's guns away. I assure you I am not. But let's think
We're in
about...
the wrong seats here.
I know, right? I have a serious conversation. I want to have a conversation about where were the heads of our forefathers, right? This was a different time and a different era. I don't think the Royal Army was coming in with Tomahawk missiles. However, interestingly enough, and I've always been intrigued by history and commentary, and I know that as soon as I make this statement, somebody's going to send in a message saying that wasn't the real reason. But in Switzerland during World War II, weren't you look at what Hitler was trying to do in Poland and some of these other areas, he didn't go near Switzerland. It is a law in Switzerland, to correct me if I'm wrong, data guy, that every home must have a gun.
They do have a mandatory They have a mandatory service, and yes, they have to keep their.
So you have to know how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have it on the premises,
and you've been trained.
Right? Now, there are arguments and historians that say that it was more the terrain, right? That you've got mountains and you've got these issues in Switzerland that even Napoleon wouldn't have probably tried to overcome.
Well, the Swiss had all those knives, right? Yeah.
And then there's other arguments saying, well, that's where Hitler stored all the money.
Oh, sure.
So, you got to be good to the people that have your money.
Hide the artwork.
But I think there is something to the fact that, that there is a responsibility that comes with it, and if that responsibility is therefore trained by the government, there's a different level of respect and understanding, right?
Yeah.
So again, I think that when you have an extreme, no rules, no barriers, no anything, it's the same as me saying, well, I'm going to go buy that Ferrari that drives 200 miles an hour, and it's my right to have that car, therefore it's my right to drive it 200 miles an hour down the road. No, it's not. It's not your right to do that. And the government makes sure of that. But yet I can have as many guns as I want, and I can do with them whatever I want until I harm somebody. But isn't the toothpaste a little out of the tube at that point?
Well, I think there's also an issue of not only responsibility on the end of the seller, but like you said, responsibility on the end of the owner. I mean, it's a matter of exactly what you said. It's simply respect. When you were a kid, you understood like that was not by no means a toy. That was not something fun. That was like a cool centerpiece above the mantle. There's a reason that's there, and God forbid it should ever really need to be used for that purpose, right? I mean, I worry nowadays, especially with how much of this is circulated, not through the internet, but I guess just media, how much we talk about guns. Maybe that gets lost a little bit, right? What do you think?
I actually would agree with that, and I think that you've got this situation too where, and we're not going to solve this in one show one day, but you have to have a deeper conversation around all of the influencing aspects of this. And the reason I say that is, and Andrew, I know you and I had a little bit of a conversation about this earlier about our desensitization. I can't even say it.
Desensitization?
Thank you.
Maybe? I don't know.
Right?
Yeah.
It is a Monday. But, right, we've desensitized our kids into thinking that violence is just a part of everyday life. I mean, my 4-year-old is asking me about school shootings this week. Shame on me for the fact that she was able to ask me about that. But it's hard to, I mean, it's on the news. We're watching the news, and she walks by and she hears this, and then she asks the question, Daddy, what's going on? I got to answer the question. I'm not going to lie to my kid. But at the same time, you've got to protect them a little bit. But something is happening here when, we're watching movies, we have extreme access to information, our kids do, and maybe they don't have the maturity level to process that.
That's true, which is why things like video games have ratings. So something like Grand Theft Auto is supposed to be, it's rated M for mature, and you are not supposed to be able to buy that game unless you're 16 or 17. I want to say 17. 17 without a parent. So anytime you've seen an 11, 12, 14-year-old who's got Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, that is a parent or a relative who bought that game and gave it to them despite the ratings notification.
I want to come out real quick. I'm a pretty avid gamer in my free time. There's Andrew maybe as well. There's something cathartic about getting yelled at on Xbox Live by a 12-year-old and calling you racial slurs, and everything under the sun. There's something. It's a chilling experience. It really is. And you're exactly right. That's why ratings are a thing. There are stopgaps in place to help parents kind of suss this out. I guess the question from there is, are they effective enough? And that's only in the case of video games. You're looking at movies, Hollywood, trailers, just commercials they see on YouTube and in television.
PG-13, rated R, NC-17.
Sure.
These ratings are supposed to be guides for the parents, but if the parents aren't enforcing it, and that's where that onus is at that point, is who's your guardian, who brought you here? Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
I mean...
And by the way, kids have been getting their hands on stuff they weren't old enough to get, and it wasn't always to mean the parents.
I understand.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
The beer run guy, you slip. I'm not speaking personally.
Of course
not. But hey, buddy, I'll buy your 6-pack if you buy me one. That type of stuff. The R-rated movies they sneak into. But listen, even kids getting online, I can buy something, and all I got to do is check the box saying, yes, I'm 18, or use my parents' name to do that. I can buy Grand Theft Auto through their Amazon account, right?
Oh, sure.
Who would go on the internet and lie, Seth?
I know.
Ask.
But again, I think this all becomes part of the bigger conversation is, are we creating a system and a structure where kids who have access to unlimited amounts of information but don't have the maturity to process that information now have access to arguably some of the most violent things in the world, inclusive of not only our minds, but what happens when our minds blend with our weaponry? And is that a conversation that we should have? Because I believe that it is.
Yeah.
And I think that for people that just immediately discount that and say that all these cards on the table, shame on you. This week in the Texas legislature, we were taking up, red flag laws. Now, red flag law means effectively, is there something that, we were talking about school safety. And Governor Abbott came out and he made a comment about red flag laws. Not that he was whether for them or against them necessarily, but that we should talk about them. And immediately the Texas legislature shut it down.
For those just tuning in, what is a red flag law?
Yeah, so a red flag law means that if you have somebody with a place of authority, and again, I'm butchering, I'm sure the true definition of this, but can there be some aspect where a teacher, a school administrator, a doctor, or somebody can kind of create this database for kids that they're concerned about? So, hey, I'm concerned about some way that this kid's writing papers, the way that they're acting out, and maybe we need to watch them a little closer. Maybe we need to inform the authorities about what's going on so they don't ultimately become like what we saw in Santa Fe, Texas, where this kid who got turned down over and over and over again by a girl and felt like he was bullied, brought a gun, shot the girl and a number of her friends. Would a red flag law have stopped that? Now, and I know we're getting into this possible infringement of personal rights and structures, but I think there has to be a process where we can at least bring to light concerns. We tell people that all the time, and that's why they call them red flags. Were there red flags?
Sure
there were, but we didn't do that. We didn't act on those red flags, and we have to make it easier to do that. And I get that we were talking about this, that there is a concern over someone's rights and someone's safety. But when you're 15, 16 years old, and my kid goes to school where you go to school, I'm all about the overall rights of the American citizen. But if there's a potential for you to do harm to my child, I want somebody to talk about it.
Yeah.
I want it to be part of the conversation. Now, this isn't black and white.
Of course not.
There's some gray area here. But can't we go ahead and just start to discount the people that are on the far left and the people that are on the far right and their extreme measures that are so principled they'll never, ever join the conversation anyway, and find somebody in the middle here to find some politicians that are open to having a real conversation, that have the ability to impact change, to say there has to be a place here that we can meet on this and take the necessary first steps.
I think there's also got to be an admission of loss of some kind of, you know, to compromise, both sides got to lose something, right?
Yeah.
That's got to happen somewhere along the way. Like if we're going to get to the middle somewhere, even if you're relatively in the middle, you're going to lose something, right? Why aren't people quicker to accept that in the light of what's happening?
I think everybody wants somebody else to lose their something, but they don't want to lose it themselves.
Of course.
This is called compromise.
Sure.
Look at Congress right now. Nobody compromises.
Right.
They want the other guy to. Well, when you aren't willing to, but you just want everybody else to do it, nobody's going to do it. Right? Listen, this is a topic I have no doubt we're going to be talking about a lot. I hope that we don't have to talk about this on the heels of another school shooting as we start to think about entering into the school year. I hope that maybe this will morph into conversations about the fact that we can spend $70 million on football stadiums, but we can't spend a few $100,000 on school safety. I think that's part of the conversation too. I think there needs to be more of a conversation around what we're allowing our kids access to from an informational standpoint without the ability to process that information. And I think we just need to have an all-around real conversation about this, that bad people are going to do bad things, and don't get me wrong, if they're coming after me, I want every weapon in my arsenal to protect me and my family. I want to be able to enjoy the rights of target shooting and hunting with my kids and have the same experiences that my father and I and my brothers had. But there's a balance. And it isn't always black and white. It's oftentimes somewhere in the middle. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I think we did fine without TJ. Although I would love to have it, and we will bring TJ back because again, I really do want to know his thoughts on this. And maybe if you're tuning in to Squid and Bear tonight, it's something we'll get into.
Squid and
on
Bear.
His YouTube show. Yeah. That's right. Amidst the beer and the cigar smoke. My wife is going to be like, "You're not coming home smelling like cigars." Thanks. Yeah. But listen, I still think we had a great conversation here, and it starts here. It starts with people having real conversations, not coming into this saying, "I got all the answers," because I don't. I don't have all the answers. But in absence of answers, you ask questions, and you think critically about things, and you listen to one another to say, maybe we can start to figure this thing out. Because that's where it starts, and I think that's what's missing in this conversation. So, figure skate judging. Gun control.
You heard it here first, folks.
There was.
Big thanks, as always, to Zach, Mr. Apple Zackintosh. Follow him on Twitter.
Thanks.
And follow the folks here at Real News Communications Network as well. Great folks. Jeff Crilly, Sarah Crilly, the whole team here. Josh, Matt, Anna, everybody. They're great folks here. Thanks for everything. Andrew, buddy, always enjoy it.
Thank you. Glad to come in here and poke the bear.
I'm sure. Well, you didn't get to poke the bear this
TJ,
week.
get back here.
He's there. Hopefully, TJ, if you're listening, buddy.
Round two.
Hopefully, you got off the road and got someplace dry. It's raining here in Texas today, so hopefully he's okay. A big thanks, as always, to my beautiful wife, Jenna, my wonderful daughters, Emerson and Arabella. for being my reason, and my reason to want to think critically and listen to others and maybe realize that I don't have all the answers. But I want to ask better questions so I can find them out. So when it comes to gun control or gun regulation or 3D printing or school shootings, I know that I am still considering a number of things, but I do know where I land on this. It's high time that we have a real conversation about guns in our society. The gun debate has gone on long enough, and you know why? It's because it's been a debate, not a conversation. Each side is bringing their argument, but neither is bringing their ears. Part of our reluctance to listen is because both sides on the gun issue seem to argue from an extreme position. Neither taking away all guns is a reasonable argument, nor is allowing someone to amass enough weapons to arm the 36th Infantry Division. By the way, I'm no lawyer, but I've read the Constitution, and the Second Amendment doesn't offer you the right to an arsenal. But regardless of the specifics, the extreme beliefs on both sides of this issue are why we don't get anywhere near solving the problem. And if you don't believe we have a gun problem in the United States, I've got some oceanfront property in the desert to sell you. So if we could just excuse the extremists from the discussion for a moment, I do have a few common sense points to consider when it comes to guns. 1, people currently suffering from a major form of mental illness should not own or have access to a gun. We can and should be able to centralize a database integrated with what are called EHRs, that's electronic health records, to ensure that those currently suffering can't buy a gun during that time. Now, people heal. They do get better. But at the moment of strife, you don't put a person suffering a heart problem on a roller coaster, and you don't give someone hearing angry voices in their head a firearm. With regards to health records integration, background checks are essential to a society where the sane and law-abiding citizens have the right to have guns, but the mentally ill and criminals don't. Yes, I recognize that by definition, criminals aren't abiding by the law anyway, but that doesn't mean we should make it easy for them. Background checks are necessary at all venues, not just gun shops, but gun shows as well. We carry around computers and data processors in our pockets, so don't tell me we can't find a way to perform instantaneous background checks at a gun show. If they have Wi-Fi on the International Space Station, we can find a way to run a background check at the county flea market. But in the absence of the background check, maybe a few days to wait isn't the worst idea either. Rage is real. And if you must have a gun today, I'm honestly wondering why. In an immediate fear for your life, call the police. And third, we must keep guns out of the hands of children who aren't mature enough to process emotions or cope with their own internal issues. Kids are just that. They are kids. I don't care that they have access to unlimited information at the push of a button. Maturity is the same today as it was 1,000 years ago. And guess what? Kids don't have it yet. That's why we don't let them drink or perform open heart surgery. Growing up, we had guns in our house, but we also had a dad who taught me and my brothers respect for those guns. However, just in case of our own stupidity, he protected us once again, not by not allowing access to those guns. Parents must be responsible for their kids, and in the absence of being responsible when raising them, you should be liable for them. I'm done turning on the news and hearing about school shootings. And I'm done hearing politicians offer up only their thoughts and prayers, but not their actions or common sense. It is common sense that will solve this problem. I'm a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. Come by my house sometime. We'll go hunting together. But I want to see real action around limiting gun access for the wrong people. I also want to maintain the ability that if a bad guy comes into my house with the intent of doing harm to me and my family, that I can put 3 rounds center mass. When it comes to having a conversation surrounding guns, it shouldn't be an all or nothing debate. That's what keeps us from coming together on this. We don't get anywhere by fast forwarding to the end, and we have to take one reasonable step at a time. There's almost always common ground on an issue. And if you can't seem to find any here, perhaps we just shouldn't invite you to the conversation. Finding myself somewhere in the middle, I'm Seth Denson.